So today I want to share with you the steps that are needed to resolve your emotional eating. So if you're new here, welcome. My name is Michelle. I'm a certified holistic nutritionist specializing in emotional eating. So I wanted to share with you what we actually need to move through and resolve our emotional eating. A lot of the times what's out there, what's sold to us, the solutions that are sold to us are really on the surface. So you can almost think of all of the solutions out there as being this giant iceberg. What we see is really the tip of the iceberg, and it's really superficial. It's not going to get into the deeper roots because it's only looking at the surface symptoms of our emotional eating. So if we look at emotional eating, the symptoms of emotional eating look like obsessive thoughts about food, going to food to soothe ourselves from distress, discomfort, uncomfortable emotions, feeling out of control with food. And this is usually accompanied by yo-yo dieting, trying all of the magic bullets, thinking something's wrong with us, feeling like we can't be normal around food. And this would have been a really long-standing pattern. We've always had this sort of unhealthy relationship to food, our body, and our emotions. If you think back to the beginning of your pattern or your life in terms of your relationship to food, your body, and your emotions, it's always been sort of a wonky. And there's a reason for this. And you're not the only one. Every woman that I talk to that has this emotional eating pattern has these relationships that are unhealthy with food, their body, and their emotions. They all come together in a package. And so when I was on my own emotional eating journey, I had the same issues, but they were really separate to me and kind of interconnected, but I didn't know where they were truly coming from. So when I started, when I look back and reflect on my own journey, and this might resonate with you, it started when I was very young, around grade 4, I started to think, something's wrong with my body. And so I need to change it to be accepted, to be loved. And I also thought, okay, so then I need to control food. But then I also used food to soothe myself, to, if there was discomfort, I used food as this tool. And so food, it's like, how do I control food? But then I also go to it to do this. And it wasn't obvious at grade 4. But as time progressed and I was restricting food, which restricting food can also create binges, which is one layer, and we'll kind of dive into how multi-layered emotional eating is. Eventually, I was just relying on food to soothe myself when a lot of discomfort and stress would come up, especially in high school. So I was using food, eating boxes of cookies to soothe myself, but then on the other extreme, restricting. And that's a pattern that is also with a lot of emotional eaters, this restrict and binge sort of swing left to right, trying to control the food, but just can't, because whenever we restrict, we're not addressing the deeper layers of the pattern, or we over-exercise and then we swing to the other extreme of not wanting to do anything. We can't find that balance because something deeper is running the pattern. And so there are emotions in emotional eating. And the emotions and the way we think and feel about ourselves, it's what's really running the show and running this pattern and making us do all kinds of different things in order to get that acceptance and validation and connection and certain needs met. This is what we're really craving if we dig deeper under the layer. When we are very young and we have unmet needs, or we have parents or caregivers that can't help us navigate through distress, uncomfortable emotions, we start using food to cope and to soothe ourselves. So it becomes a coping mechanism. And so if our parents or caregivers were able to guide us through that process, to help us resolve our emotions, to hold that space, if they were regulated themselves, they could then show it to us. But for most of us, we didn't have parents or caregivers like that. They didn't have those tools. They weren't taught that themselves. It happens in generations, and this is what really leads to addictive patterns like emotional eating, among other kinds of addictions. We are not getting our deeper needs met, and we're not being shown how to move through discomfort and distress in order to have our needs met, which can be multi-layered. And so this is happening at this this level. So all of these things are happening, creating this emotional eating pattern. And it's almost like all of these things are just lumped together. And so I see this time and time again with women, and it's a very clear pattern. It's this sort of relationship. We can categorize it as we have this relationship to food, our body, and our emotions, and they all become kind of like messed up. I don't know how to say. They all kind of get like squished into a ball. And so what we need to do is to start unpacking the layers. And so we can look at it in terms of a solution, a resolution, as having 3 key areas we need to look at. And so in the Emotional Eating Evolution program, it's structured in this way where we are connecting to each of these layers and seeing the interconnections into our pattern. So we want to resolve it layer by layer, but in reality, these things are all happening simultaneously. But we obviously need a process and a system so that we can get a handle step by step and start understanding what's going on for us. So the first layer of unwrapping this pattern, and it might seem counterintuitive, but I think of it as the most outermost layer, which is around food. So when I work with clients inside of the Emotional Eating Evolution program, what we're doing is looking at the relationship to food. And I'm also giving them a template, a structure to start connecting back to food. So this is based on biology, on digestion, physiology. It's looking at all of the patterns in a healthy relationship to food. And we're starting to learn a new way of being with food and seeing from that how we feel in our body, what is true hunger in our body, discerning true from emotional hunger, knowing how to nourish ourselves so we're not binging out of starvation or restriction, seeing that when we're nourishing ourselves, where is our emotional eating pattern popping up, and then using deeper tools to actually get into the emotions. And so we're learning this new way of nourishing ourselves and moving away from that diet restrictive mentality that we've been taught, which is an unhealthy way of being with food that is very external and telling us something's wrong with us and we're broken, which actually feeds into our shame and feeds into the emotional eating pattern as well. So it's not only that we're physically restricting ourselves from foods, which triggers us to want to binge, but there's a deeper shame that we're doing it wrong, that we're not doing it the right way, that also triggers the emotional eating pattern. So we look at that layer, then we move into body acceptance, because body shame and not feeling acceptable in the body we have triggers emotional eating, because it's shame. It's an uncomfortable emotion. It's feeling like we don't belong and we won't have those needs met. So we turn then to food to soothe ourselves, which actually plays more back into the shame cycle of our body. And we're in this vicious loop. So we have to learn how to start accepting our body with where it's at because of all of the things we've done, but also accepting our body means what are the rhythms our body needs? What are the, rituals and tools, and how do we start honoring our body and accepting it so we're no longer shaming it because it doesn't fit into someone else's box. And this actually shifts our body and our nervous system to a more calm state so that it can find its healthy. Because when we shame ourselves, we're in this vicious cycle of putting our body, our nervous system into a stress mode, which actually turns it on for inflammation and weight gain and feeling that discomfort in our body and so many digestive issues that then contribute back into body shame. So we're in this vicious loop again. When we shift to body acceptance, we're shifting also all of those limiting beliefs we have around our body, those shaming beliefs and the way we punish our body. And so that's another layer that triggers emotional eating. And then in the third layer, we're actually working with our emotions and the deeper traumas, the deeper patterns that created this. So when we don't have our deeper needs met, when we weren't able to move through our discomfort or distress or uncomfortable emotions, we then turn to food to soothe. So we have to go in and find the root of when this happened and start repatterning and relearning a new way of being with emotions. But we have to actually resolve the unresolved emotions and unresolved events, because those emotions are now stuck. They're stuck somatically in our body. Whatever we don't process and integrate remains in our body. Our body holds these emotions somatically. And so we need to move through them, get to the root, and start creating a new way to move through them. So we're resolving that initial pattern at the root and moving forward in a new way. And this is what helps us to resolve the patterns. We're no longer going to food to soothe ourselves. We're actually meeting our deeper emotional needs and creating a new way forward. If that's boundaries or changing something in our life, we have a new way forward of meeting other needs. So we have emotional needs and other needs, things we might need to change and shift in our life. So these 3 layers are super important. There's another layer, but these are the 3 key ones we need to look at. And they're all interconnected because the way we process through those deeper emotions can play into the shame we feel around food or our body. And when we are, we need to make sure we're nourishing ourselves so we're not going to emotional tools when we are restricting. So it's all interconnected. We need to be discerning about what's going on. So this is what's needed to have an integrated approach to resolving your emotional eating pattern. There there of course are more details and nuances. It becomes very simple once you learn the pattern, but you also have to understand that you are multifaceted and emotional eating is multi-layered. And so it is a new way forward. We can't keep thinking that we're going to try the quick fix or this injection or this magic surgery is going to solve our issue. It's not, because we are multifaceted. We are physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. We have all of these layers to us, and they all need to be aligned in order for us to resolve this pattern. So that is sort of the overview of what's needed to resolve your emotional eating. And if you're interested in the details of the Emotional Eating Evolution program, I'd love to invite you to find out more at the link below. The program has these components as well as support, guidance, coaching, one-to-one support to help you really move through this pattern. And it's in a 12-week container so that you are moving through the resistance and blocks and getting to the other side of this pattern and creating a new way forward, a way that you feel at ease and peace and confidence in your body and around food. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't, and I look forward to sharing more with you, and I hope you have a great day.